Picture this. You're sitting in a massive outdoor amphitheater. It's September 10th, 2025.
Right.
Utah Valley University. The sun is out. It's a beautiful day. There are, 3,000 people packed into this space. Hundreds of cell phones are recording.
A very public, very documented event.
Exactly. And there's a massive security detail surrounding the perimeter. Then suddenly, 31-year-old conservative icon Charlie Kirk he slumps over on stage, assassinated.
It's the kind of highly visible, shocking public spectacle that just instantly freezes time for everyone watching.
Yeah, absolute chaos. And almost immediately, this incredibly tidy narrative forms. Like if you check Wikipedia today, right now, it is presented as a totally open and shut case.
A very clean, linear story.
Right. The official story is that a 22-year-old lone gunman named Tyler Robinson was allegedly up on the roof of the Lou Center.
Which is about 142 yards away from the stage?
Yeah, 142 yards. And he supposedly uses this old Mauser-style .3006 hunting rifle, hits Kirk directly in the neck, drops the gun in the woods, and just runs away. Case closed.
It provides immediate closure. Cause and effect. The sniper on the roof.
Except, well, until the autopsy happens. And until the defense attorneys actually get their hands on the ballistics report.
Which completely changed the landscape of the case.
It blew it wide open. Because, according to this massive bombshell document dropped by TMZ, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, they ran their summary report, and they were literally unable to match the bullet pulled from Charlie Kirk's neck to that sniper rifle found in the woods.
Which is, legally speaking, the absolute foundation of the state's entire narrative.
Exactly. I mean, if the physical bullet inside the victim doesn't match the gun left on the roof, then the entire lone gunman story it physically collapses.
It falls apart completely.
And that raises a genuinely terrifying question for you, the listener. If a distant sniper didn't shoot him, what the hell actually killed him?
And trying to answer that exact question has spawned an investigative landscape that is just incredibly dense. It's highly polarized and, frankly, kind of surreal.
Which is exactly why we are jumping into this today. We are doing a full deep dive into this alternative hypothesis that is absolutely exploding across alternative media and all over Reddit.
But before we get too deep into the weeds, we need to establish some really important ground rules for you, the listener.
Yeah, please do, because this gets wild.
It really does. The sources we are unpacking today, and we're talking about extensive Reddit threads, multi-part podcast series from people like Candace Owens and Stu Peters, leaked legal filings, and even chemistry textbooks. These sources contain highly polarized, politically charged content.
Right.
They touch on everything from massive left-wing and right-wing internal corruption to extreme geopolitical Zionist narratives and deep state conspiracies. And we need to be crystal clear up front. We are not endorsing, validating, or taking sides on any of these viewpoints or conspiracy theories.
Absolutely not. We're just the messengers here.
Exactly. Our sole mission today is strictly to map the architecture of this alternative hypothesis. We are impartially laying out the arguments and the physical anomalies these specific sources are pointing to, just to help you understand the conversation that's happening out there.
Right. We want to help you wrap your head around the mechanics of a theory that basically posits Charlie Kirk wasn't killed by a sniper at all, but rather by a highly sophisticated inside job.
A pager-style explosive device.
Yes. Hidden right inside his own lavalier microphone and allegedly executed by the very insiders trusted to keep him alive. So, I mean, if the ATF is saying the bullet doesn't match the gun, we really have to start with the physics of the actual wound.
Ballistics. We have to look at the ballistics.
Yeah, because internet sleuths immediately started pointing out that a .30 UC06 round hitting a human neck from that distance, it just doesn't match what we all saw in those uncensored stage videos.
It fundamentally contradicts the physiological reality of high-velocity impact. To understand why people are frantically searching for an alternative weapon, you have to understand the cartridge they are blaming it on. The .30-06 Springfield?
Which is not a small bullet.
No, it is not a subtle piece of ammunition at all. It was designed over a century ago for military combat. And today, it is universally respected by hunters as one of the premier cartridges for taking down massive game. We're talking moose, elk, brown bears.
Right. So we aren't talking about like a little .22 caliber plinking round that just sort of rattles around. This is a massive, heavy projectile designed to drop a 1,000-pound animal in its tracks.
Precisely. And when a bullet of that mass, traveling at supersonic velocities, impacts biological tissue, It doesn't just drill a neat pencil-thin hole.
It's way more destructive than that.
The physics are devastating. It creates what trauma surgeons and ballistics experts call a temporary stretch cavity.
I was reading through some of the David Pakman Show subreddit threads that were included in our sources, and they kept bringing up this term, hydrostatic shock.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. The kinetic energy transfer is so violent and so incredibly rapid that the tissue essentially explodes outward from the wound channel. It rips apart blood vessels, muscle, and bone far beyond the actual path of the physical bullet itself.
And the Reddit users were arguing that if a .3006 hits a human neck, which, is relatively thin and packed with critical structures like the cervical spine, the carotid artery, the jugular, his neck bones simply couldn't have absorbed that round without catastrophic damage.
They couldn't. The laws of physics dictate uncontainable trauma. I mean, expecting a human neck to absorb a .3006 is like expecting to catch a bowling ball dropped from a skyscraper with a tissue.
Wow. That's a brutal image, but it makes sense.
In military and hunting parlance, a strike to a target of that size with that specific round produces what is grimly referred to as a pink mist. You would expect an entry wound, and then a massive, cavernous blowout on the opposite side as the bullet and all the pulverized bone exit the body.
But, and this is the crazy part, when you watch the uncensored footage that flooded Twitter and Telegram right after it happened, you absolutely do not see that.
You don't.
You see a relatively small, localized wound on the front left of his neck. And crucially, when he slumps over, there is no massive exit wound on the back of his neck.
Which is a structural impossibility. If the official story is true, that bullet had to exit. The fact that the visual evidence shows a complete lack of expected high-velocity blood spray or massive external cavitation is really the first major domino to fall in the minds of these independent analysts.
Which brings us right back to that TMZ bombshell from March 2026.
The legal filings.
Yeah, the defense attorneys for this 22-year-old kid, Tyler Robinson, filed these legal documents essentially screaming, hey, our client's gun didn't fire the fatal bullet.
And if the physical bullet doesn't match the physical gun, the entire lone wolf sniper theory is literally dead on arrival.
But it gets worse for the defense, right?
Yeah.
Because they are just getting buried.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. What's equally concerning in those TMZ documents is the sheer volume of discovery the prosecution is dumping on the defense team. We are talking about 20,000 individual files.
20,000.
60,000 pages of documents and over 700 hours of video footage.
It's like they are trying to drown these public defenders in an ocean of digital noise. It's the ultimate magician's trick. Misdirection on an industrial scale.
It's a classic tactic.
You bury a small team of lawyers in 60,000 pages of totally irrelevant paperwork, like every campus security log, every cafeteria receipt from UVU that day, so they just don't have the time or the resources to focus on the glaring physical anomalies.
Like the fact that the state hasn't even produced the exculpatory ATF report for the preliminary hearing. The tactical deployment of information overload is a well-documented strategy in complex litigation, but it becomes incredibly sinister when it's allegedly used to obscure a compromised chain of evidence in a capital murder trial.
Right. Okay, so if the bullet in his neck wasn't fired from a sniper rifle, and if the physical trauma doesn't match a high-powered hunting round at all, what did the camera footage actually capture at the exact millisecond of impact?
And this is where we have to look at Candace Owens' coverage.
Yeah, episode 311 of her podcast. She went on an absolute tear about this because she managed to get her hands on exclusive footage taken from behind Charlie Kirk on the stage.
And this behind-the-head angle is really the Rosetta Stone for the entire alternative hypothesis.
Why is that?
Well, almost all the broadcast footage that the public saw was taken from the front of the stage, looking directly at Kirk. And when you only have one two-dimensional plane to look at, depth and pressure become incredibly difficult to gauge.
That makes sense. It's just flat.
Right, but Owens' exclusive footage is from behind his right shoulder, looking out toward the crowd.
And man, the internet sleuths started going through this footage frame by microsecond frame. The level of obsession on these Reddit threads is staggering, and they zeroed in on what they are all calling the shirt puff anomaly.
The shirt puff is essentially a visual representation of pressure. In the footage from behind, at the exact moment of the incident, the fabric of Kirk's shirt on his back moves significantly and unmistakably toward the tent wall, away from his body.
And I keep rereading the physics breakdowns on this because it's so completely counterintuitive to the official story. Like if a sniper shoots you from a roof behind the crowd, the bullet hits your front, right? The energy pushes through you, and the exit wound and the pressure wave would push your shirt out your back.
Wait, let's correct the geometry there just a bit.
Oh, right. Sorry.
The official story claims the shooter, Tyler Robinson, was on the roof of the Lucy Center, which was actually situated behind the stage.
Oh, my mistake. Okay, so the Lucy Center was behind him. So the official bullet allegedly entered his back and exited the front of his neck.
Exactly. And that is exactly where the physics of the shirt puff utterly destroy the official narrative.
Walk me through it.
If a bullet traveling at 2,800 feet per second strikes you from behind, the kinetic energy pushes forward. The fabric of your shirt on your back would be punched inward, physically pressed against your skin by the projectile, and the fabric on your front would blow outward with the exit wound.
But the Candace Owens footage shows the exact opposite happening.
Yeah.
The back of his shirt balloons outward, flaring away from his spine.
Which heavily suggests a violent release of energy originating from the front or entirely internally. An internal pressure wave created by rapidly expanding gases will always push the surrounding fabric outward in all directions, just trying to find the path of least resistance.
And it's not just the shirt flaring out either. The frame-by-frame analysis isolated another anomaly that just blew my mind.
The necklace debate.
Yeah. At first, from the blurry front-facing angles that everyone saw in the news, people thought they saw a tiny mist of blood spatter on the right side of his neck the millisecond he was hit.
Right, but when video stabilization and high-definition enhancement were applied by these independent analysts, that initial assumption changed entirely.
It wasn't biological at all. It wasn't
Yeah.
blood or tissue exiting his neck. It was his necklace. And more importantly, it was the microphone rigging taped to his collar, moving and flying apart first.
The metal and plastic of the lavalier mic setup physically shatters and lifts off his chest before his body even begins to react to the trauma.
Which is insane to watch.
This specific sequence of events, the mechanical components shattering outward before the biological reaction, coupled with the outward flare of the shirt on his back, it all points to an energy release that is localized directly on his chest or neck, not a projectile passing completely through him from 100 yards away.
And then we have to talk about the sound, or I guess the lack of it. Because if someone fires a .306 without a silencer, and nowhere in the 60,000 pages of the official narrative is there any mention of Tyler Robinson having a suppressor, it is deafeningly loud.
A standard .30 DACE 06 fired in an open or semi-enclosed environment like that operates at around 160 decibels.
Which is like a jet engine, right?
It produces a massive supersonic crack, which is then followed by a deep rolling muzzle blast. It literally shakes the air around you.
I've been to outdoor ranges when someone fires one of those a few lanes over, and I'm telling you, even with heavy ear protection, you feel it in your teeth.
Now put that weapon on a roof overlooking a concrete and canvas amphitheater with 3,000 people. If that gun goes off, human reflex is completely involuntary. Thousands of heads would instantly snap toward the deafening crack.
Yet the acoustic profile in the crowd reaction videos just does not support this at all. The crowd doesn't flinch at a distant boom. They don't look up at the Lewis Center. They react seconds later to the visual of Charlie Kirk slumping over and to the immediate screaming panic of the people closest to the stage.
So let's stack these physical anomalies up for the listener.
Let's do it.
The ATF can't match the bullet to the gun. There's no massive exit wound. The shirt blows outward in the wrong direction entirely. The microphone shatters before the flesh reacts, and absolutely nobody hears a high-powered sniper rifle crack.
So if you throw out the sniper theory entirely, what actually fits this exact physical profile?
This is where Stu Peters introduces the most chilling aspect of the entire conspiracy.
The Christmas broadcast.
Yes. In his December 25th broadcast, he unequivocally calls the sniper story a hoax. He posits that the real murder weapon was a device planted right on Charlie's collar. He specifically refers to it as Israel's signature exploding lavalier mic,
drawing a direct, horrifying parallel to those pager-style remote detonation operations used in global intelligence.
Exactly.
We've seen that happen, right? Where intelligence agencies intercept personal electronics in the supply chain, pack them with a few grams of microexplosives, and detonate them remotely.
It's a known operational tactic.
But applying that to a podcast microphone, I think for a lot of listeners, the word explosive makes them picture a Hollywood fireball that would take out the entire tent and everyone on stage. How does a mic bomb create a wound that perfectly mimics a gunshot?
That's where the science becomes deeply fascinating and genuinely terrifying.
Walk us through it.
Our source material included excerpts from specific chemistry textbooks dealing with high-energy materials, propellants, and explosives. To pull off an assassination that looks like a gunshot, you don't use massive charge that creates a fireball.
You don't use C4.
No. You use a microscopic amount of a highly sensitive, highly energetic material. The sources point to things like a nitrocarbon compound or a polynitroaromatic compound.
I was reading about these nitrocarbon-shaped charges in the prep material. You don't need a pound of this stuff. You need something the size of, like an aspirin tablet, right?
Exactly. A few grams at most. The key is the rate of detonation and the precise shaping of the charge. The textbook explains the physics of high-order detonations. We are talking about materials that detonate at velocities exceeding 7,000 meters per second.
7,000 meters per second. I can't even fathom that speed.
The chemical reaction creates an instantaneous conversion from a solid material directly to a gaseous product, generating a hypervelocity shockwave.
If it just exploded outward in all directions, it would blow off his jaw, right? And it would take off the fingers of anyone standing next to him. How do they direct that violent energy entirely into his neck?
Through the principle of a shaped charge.
Okay, unpack that.
This technology is widely used in military armor-piercing munitions and also in precision commercial mining. By molding the explosive material into a specific shape, typically with a conical or hemispherical hollow cavity facing the target, you fundamentally manipulate the physics of the blast wave.
So you shape it like a little cone.
Yes, and when the explosive is detonated from the back, the shockwaves collapse inward on that hollow cavity.
And the sources mention lining that cavity. If that cavity is lined with a thin metal like copper or aluminum,
the immense pressure of the collapsing shockwave turns that solid metal liner into a hypervelocity jet of molten plasma and kinetic energy. It focuses all the chaotic outward energy of the explosion into a needle-thin directional beam.
the textbook used this term, localized adiabatic shear. I had to look it up because it just sounded like total sci-fi jargon.
It is a very technical concept.
But it essentially means that when this focused jet of molten energy hits a material, whether it's half-inch steel armor or human tissue, it applies so much localized heat and physical strain so incredibly quickly that the material physically fails before the heat can even dissipate into the surrounding area.
It literally punches a perfect cauterized hole. Think of it like a microscopic, instantaneous blowtorch. The alternative theory posits that this shaped charge was engineered directly into the battery pack or the transmitter of the lavalier microphone. A device which, by the way, TPUSA audio techs routinely taped directly to his chest or neck beneath his shirt before every single event.
So if the charge is oriented specifically upward and inward toward his neck,
Yep.
it explains every single visual anomaly we just talked about.
Let's run it through the checklist.
Okay. Let's do it.
First, the localized adiabatic shear punches into the neck, creating an entry wound that perfectly mimics a bullet hole from a distance.
But because the explosive payload is so small, all its energy is completely spent just creating that initial channel. There isn't a solid mass of lead physically pushing all the way through, so there is no exit wound on the back of his neck.
Exactly. Second, the sudden creation of expanding gas from the chemical explosion creates a massive high-pressure zone under his clothing.
Right, and that gas rapidly expands outward, catching the fabric of his shirt and pushing it away from his body, creating the shirt puff anomaly seen in the Candace Owens footage.
Third, because the device is physically destroying itself to create the shaped charged jet, the plastic housing, the metal clips, the necklace, they are the very first things to shatter and fly off, literally milliseconds before the jet actually penetrates the skin.
Which perfectly explains the high-def footage.
And finally, the acoustic anomaly. A few grams of a high-energy nitrocarbon explosive detonating underneath layers of clothing and pressed directly against biological tissue does not sound like a sniper rifle.
What does it sound like?
It sounds like a sharp pop or a hard crack, and it's heavily muffled by the body absorbing the majority of the blast. It would sound entirely out of place in a crowded amphitheater. It would just blend into the ambient noise, or maybe sound like a blown speaker to the crowd rather than a supersonic gunshot.
It's an engineered assassination designed to look exactly like a sniper attack from a distance, solely to buy time for the cover-up.
That is the core of the theory.
But, and here is the massive logistical hurdle of this whole theory, right? A sniper on a roof is a lone wolf. They can act completely alone. But a shaped charge hidden inside a microphone battery pack taped to a guy's chest, that requires physical access.
It requires extreme proximity.
The people who mic'd him up that morning, the audio technicians, his own Turning Point USA security detail, if this theory holds any water, they instantly transform from innocent bystanders into the prime suspects, or the very least, the enablers.
You cannot pull off a pager-style mic bombing without the inner circle being compromised in some way.
Exactly. which is precisely why the alternative media investigation pivots so aggressively to the events immediately following the blast. Because, I mean, if a device detonated on his chest, there would be physical evidence left behind, right?
Oh, massive amounts of trace evidence. Chemical residue from the nitrocarbon, microscopic shrapnel from the mic casing, scorch marks on the surrounding clothing, and highly specific, high-velocity blood spatter patterns on the stage floor.
And if you're the conspirators, you had to destroy that scene immediately before anyone with a forensics kit gets there.
And that is exactly what the sources allege happened.
The Reddit threads caught a detail that is so bizarre it honestly feels scripted. While the crowd is still actively screaming and Kirk's body has barely been moved off the stage, quote, someone actually stood on the chair Kirk was sitting in to remove a camera mounted on a wall.
The urgency of that specific action is highly indicative of a cover-up.
I mean, who thinks to do that?
Exactly. In a mass trauma event, human instinct is to render aid, flee for your life, or take cover. Prioritizing the removal of a specific camera angle suggests an immediate, calculated need to control the visual record of the stage before law enforcement can secure the data.
Some sources even specifically point fingers at TPUSA personnel. They name people like Turl Farnsworth or others, alleging they were involved in this rapid sanitization of the area.
But grabbing a camera off a wall is frankly amateur hour compared to what Stu Peters alleged on his January 13th episode.
This is the part that literally made my jaw drop. I couldn't believe I was reading this.
Peters claims that Utah Valley University agents and security personnel swarmed the area, formed a barricade around the stage, and engaged in what he called an earth-deep dig-up.
He alleges that they physically excavated the bloody ground where Kirk was shot, and then, before the day was even out, they poured fresh concrete and slapped down pavers over the area.
They cemented over the crime scene.
They literally paved paradise to put up a parking lot over a capital murder crime scene. I mean, how is that even possible in America?
The legal and procedural implications are staggering.
Right. The physical space where the victim was killed is supposed to be the most legally sacred ground on Earth. You grid it, you photograph every millimeter, you swab for chemical explosives, you don't bring in a cement mixer.
It violates every known protocol of forensic science. And to corroborate just how unprecedented this is, Stu Peters actually brought Sheriff Mack onto his show to discuss it.
And what did Sheriff Mack say?
Sheriff Mack claimed he had spoken directly with the prosecutor's office that was handling the Tyler Robinson case.
Wait, the kid they're trying to put on death row for the sniper shot?
Yes. And according to Sheriff Mack, the prosecutor's office was completely clueless that the crime scene had been dug up and cemented over.
The prosecution didn't even know. That is insane.
The defense attorney is trying to cross-examine 60,000 pages of digital noise, while the literal physical ground where the murder occurred is entombed under fresh concrete.
It is the perfect destruction of evidence. Any trace of a nitrocarbon explosion, any microscopic casing fragments, any blood spatter that would definitively prove the shot came from the chest and not the roof. It's gone forever.
The rapid destruction of the stage is one half of the physical cover-up alleged by these sources. The other half involves the actual handling of Charlie Kirk's body.
A medical response.
Or rather, the distinct lack of a proper medical response, which is heavily scrutinized in the alternative media.
Right, because if someone takes a .3006 to the neck, they have catastrophic vascular trauma. You are dealing with severed carotids, shredded jugulars, and potentially a completely shattered cervical spine.
The standard medical protocol for that level of trauma is rigid. You keep the victim absolutely still, apply massive, sustained pressure to the wound, and you wait for a specialized trauma unit to arrive with a backboard and a collar.
If you move a victim with an unstable spinal injury, you can easily kill them.
But the footage and the eyewitness accounts show that within seconds of him slumping over, 6 men from his own security detail just scooped him up. They practically threw him into the back of an SUV.
They didn't wait for paramedics. They initiated a rapid, chaotic scoop and run.
Which is a huge red flag for the internet sleuths.
Now, playing devil's advocate, you could argue that in a chaotic situation, maybe they thought there was an active shooter still firing, and they just needed to get him off the X to save his life.
That is the standard defense of their actions, yes.
But then Candace Owens released photos in episode 311. Photos from inside that specific transport SUV. And I looked at those photos, and I could not understand what I was seeing.
What struck you as anomalous about the interior of the vehicle?
The absolute lack of blood. If your carotid artery is severed by a massive hunting round, the arterial spray is uncontrollable. It pumps with every heartbeat. The inside of that SUV should look like a slaughterhouse.
But the photos show minimal gore.
Almost none. And the medical intervention documented inside the vehicle consisted of some basic gauze and one single Instaclot pack.
Let's explain what Instaclot is for the listener, because its presence is actually highly relevant to the shaped charge theory.
Please do.
Instaclot is a specialized hemostatic dressing. It was originally developed for the military. It's essentially a bandage impregnated with a chemical agent that promotes hyper-rapid blood coagulation. It is specifically designed for massive, life-threatening arterial bleeds on the battlefield.
Right. But if you took a .306 round to the neck, one pack of Instaclot is like bringing a single paper towel to soak up a flooded basement. It makes absolutely no sense. Unless
the wound wasn't a massive bleeding laceration to begin with.
Which brings us right back to the adiabatic shear of the shaped charge.
Exactly. The extreme thermal energy of a nitrocarbon microexplosive doesn't just cut tissue, it flash cauterizes it.
Because it's essentially molten plasma.
Yes. The heat of the jet is so intense that it literally seals the blood vessels shut in milliseconds as it punches through the flesh. The structural damage is entirely internal, therefore, there simply wouldn't be massive external hemorrhage.
The minimal blood in the SUV perfectly aligns with an explosive cauterization and directly contradicts a sniper's bullet.
And the sources argue that the fact his own security team rushed him out of there without full trauma protocols, utilizing only minimal gauze and a single clot pack. It strongly implies they knew exactly what kind of wound they were dealing with.
And they needed to get his body out of public view immediately, before any independent medical professionals or paramedics could look closely at the trauma channel and realize it wasn't a bullet hole.
This extreme proximity, the audio techs wiring him up, the security team rushing him away, the personnel removing the cameras, it points a massive glaring spotlight directly at his inner circle.
And the events inside Turning Point USA in the immediate aftermath of his death provide incredibly fertile ground for these theories of insider betrayal.
The TPUSA purge.
Yeah, the purge. You would think an organization that just lost its visionary founder to a sniper would be in a period of mourning, right? Circling the wagons, focusing on his legacy, holding vigils.
But according to Stu Peters and Candace Owens, the atmosphere inside TPUSA was the exact opposite. It was an absolute bloodbath of corporate paranoia.
The sources report that Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, rapidly assumed total control of the organization.
And this transition of power was allegedly marked by the immediate termination of 30 to 40 highly placed insiders.
They didn't just fire a couple of receptionists. They completely purged the upper ranks. Why?
The alternative media narrative frames this not as a standard corporate restructuring, but as a desperate, aggressive hunt for leaks.
As something people.
Yes. They argue Erica and the new leadership were silencing anyone who might have seen the security anomalies, the mic rigging, or the internal communications leading up to September 10th.
And the blowback from this purge was severe. An entire TPUSA chapter in Arkansas publicly disaffiliated from the national organization in protest of the new leadership and the total lack of transparency.
But the biggest leak, the one that really fueled the fire, came from a guy named Matthew Tuccione.
Yeah, the whistleblower.
Yeah.
He was a former insider who just started blowing the whistle loud and clear. And he didn't just claim they were covering up an assassination. He alleged massive underlying corruption within the organization.
We are talking about allegations of massive embezzlements, highly coordinated ballot harvesting fraud operations, and massive data heists occurring entirely within the TPUSA infrastructure.
So the implication drawn by these analysts is dual-fold. Either Charlie Kirk discovered this staggering level of corruption and was preparing to clean house, making his assassination a strict necessity for the embezzlers to survive.
Or his removal was orchestrated specifically to facilitate this corporate takeover, to gain unfettered access to the massive donor data and the millions in funds that TPUSA controlled.
And the figure sitting at the absolute center of this entire spiderweb, according to the sources, is the grieving widow herself, Erica Kirk.
Candace Owens dedicated an unprecedented 7-part podcast series strictly to Erica, titled Bride of Charlie.
7 parts. And she paints a picture that is straight out of a Cold War espionage novel. It's wild.
Owens relentlessly deconstructs Erica's background. She presents her not as a traditional conservative partner, but as a highly trained operative, a spook, who was deliberately placed in Charlie's life to monitor, control, and ultimately help neutralize him.
Owens and Peters dug up so many red flags. They point to her connections to something called the Tesseract School,
which they describe with these incredibly dark, clandestine undertones.
Yeah, and they talk about her missing years. these massive unexplained gaps in her personal timeline that seemingly cannot be verified by any public records.
Furthermore, the sources heavily emphasize a Romania connection. They allege deep ties between Erica and a group called Romanian Angels.
Which the podcast characterized as Eastern European orphan mills.
Yes, hinting at very deep, illicit international networks. Owens also highlights that Erica has an emancipated sister, suggesting hidden family fractures or perhaps fabricated identities commonly used in intelligence work.
It all sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But then they brought on an actual eyewitness whose testimony escalated everything to a whole new level.
Mitch Snow.
According to Stu Peters, Snow is a Special Forces veteran. He's a guy who knows what he's looking at. And he testified that he spotted Erica Kirk at Fort Huachuca just days before the assassination.
For context, Fort Huachuca in Arizona is not just a standard military base. It is a major installation heavily focused on military intelligence and signals intelligence.
So the obvious question the sources pose to the listener is, what is the wife of a conservative podcaster doing at a military intelligence hub days before her husband is assassinated by a highly sophisticated pager-style explosive device?
And you know what makes Snow's testimony feel credible to these analysts? The reaction to it.
Right. If a crazy guy on the internet says he saw you at a military base, you just ignore it. You laugh it off.
But according to the sources, TPUSA and Erica's allies absolutely didn't ignore it. They unleashed what psychologists call DARVO tactics against him.
DARVO. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender.
Correct. They didn't just politely say he was mistaken. They allegedly launched a massive, incredibly well-funded campaign of personal smears, legal threats, and subpoenas to completely destroy his life and silence him.
It was a scorched earth response to a seemingly simple, mistaken observation, which just screams guilt to the people following this case.
When you synthesize all these elements together, a widow with a redacted past, purging the organization of loyalists, utilizing espionage tactics to silence veterans, and allegedly visiting intelligence hubs, it builds a highly compelling narrative of an inside job.
But, and this is a big faux, to justify an operation of this magnitude, one that risks exposing a massive domestic political organization and federal law enforcement, the motive has to be astronomical.
It can't just be about money.
Exactly. You don't rig a nitrocarbon-shaped charge to a guy's chest just to steal some donor money. The stakes have to be global. What did Charlie Kirk actually know, or what was he about to do that made him a target for this level of extreme prejudice?
To understand the why, the sources zoom out from the campus of Utah Valley University to the broader geopolitical web. And the first massive thread they pull on is the Epstein orbit.
Candace Owens dedicated episodes 309 and 310 entirely to this Epstein angle. She claims that Erica Kirk's hidden past included operating directly in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit.
Specifically, she alleges Erica had ties to a modeling agency that Epstein heavily frequented to source victims.
But Owens doesn't stop at Erica. She implicates a massive bipartisan network in a continuing cover-up of the Epstein files and the blackmail leverage those files represent.
She points fingers directly at Donald Trump, former FBI Director Kash Patel, Jared Kushner, and prominent Israeli-American real estate tycoons, the Alexander brothers.
The theory suggests this entire powerful network relies on keeping the secrets within those files buried. If Charlie Kirk, with his massive audience and influence, had discovered his wife's alleged connections to this network,
or if he was preparing to go rogue and expose the ongoing blackmail operations to his millions of followers,
he would instantly become an existential threat to some of the most powerful people on the planet.
That is the blackmail motive. But the most explosive motive provided in the source material, the one that Candace Owens actually titled World War BB in episode 312, and the one Stu Peters refers to when he talks about Mossad fingerprints, involves international relations and massive power shifts regarding Israel.
Let's map this out. And again, keeping our impartiality disclaimer in mind, we are strictly analyzing the claims as presented by these controversial figures. What exactly is the World War BB theory?
The sources claim that in the months leading up to September 2025, Charlie Kirk was fundamentally evolving his political stances.
He was shifting.
Yes. He was allegedly moving rapidly away from the mainstream TPUSA and Trump-aligned neoconservative platforms, specifically regarding U.S. financial and military aid to Israel.
He was aligning heavily with figures like Representative Thomas Massie, who was notoriously America First, anti-foreign aid, and highly critical of the massive lobbying power that pushes the U.S. into Middle Eastern conflicts.
Because of Kirk's immense, unparalleled influence over over the conservative youth base, the Magie movement's next generation. His shifting views were seen as a catastrophic threat to a larger geopolitical agenda.
The sources argue that if Kirk turned his audience against foreign intervention, the political support for massive military aid would fracture.
So the alternative media characterizes this assassination as a literal Zionist takedown.
They argue that a foreign intelligence apparatus, Stu Peters, points directly to Mossad and their history of pager-style explosive operations. Collaborating with Kirk's compromised inner circle to eliminate.
And they place immense significance on the date of the assassination, September 10th.
If you guys are just on audio, you'll obviously need to
Stu Peters made this terrifying argument that the assassination was a psychological operation timed specifically
right here,
for the
we had
9/11
assumed
anniversary.
initially
The goal, according to the theory, was to traumatize the American public, blame the assassination on domestic extremism or perhaps
that it's whipping fast and it looks white when it whips fast, but that is in fact
to strip more civil liberties.
To silence dissenting America First voices and ultimately trigger a unified U.S.-backed world war with Iran to lock in foreign control of American policy.
It is a theory of truly staggering.
By the way, there's no gore
It suggests that because Charlie Kirk wouldn't play ball with a massive geopolitical war agenda, a foreign intelligence apparatus provided the Israeli
didn't even cause any sort of a mess. His perfectly white T-shirt was white
and his organization
until the moment
they planted it on his collar, executed him in broad daylight, and pinned it on a 22-year-old kid with an old hunting rifle.
But the final piece of the
first we can show
puzzle, the
them
one that
the
makes people
magnet
lay
that's
awake
still
at
on
night,
him. I guess we'll get to
is
that.
how this cover-up actually
there you go. We can pause there.
Because you can't just pave
So
over a crime scene and fake an autopsy without the federal government knowing. Where was the FBI in all of this? Where was Homeland Security?
According to
Frank
the
tells the story about how he came out to get his backpack from the car as the feds were searching it at the hospital, and he saw Charlie's necklace on
and the focal point of this massive accusation
and the feds said,
rests entirely on the director of the FBI at the time, Kash Patel.
Why were the feds looking for the necklace? How did they know he had a necklace?
In the dark when they started
That's very
digging
strange.
into
Erica, of course, has told several stories about the necklace
and
how precious the necklace was to him, and
in their view,
we can continue and we can sort of point out some more
damning piece of
portions here.
evidence comes from a whistleblower report shared by Senator Dick Durbin in February 2026.
Through here,
right? Because when a high-profile assassination happens, the FBI is supposed to immediately deploy their specialized shooting reconstruction team.
Look close at that.
These are the guys who use lasers and 3D mapping to perfectly track the trajectory of a bullet.
Some people were wondering,
to prove exactly where the sniper was standing.
There's a lot of stuff about
but
the
according to the whistleblower report,
it's still on
that
him.
forensic reconstruction team was delayed in reaching the Utah Valley University crime scene by an entire day.
A full 24 hours.
While the UVU security guards are literally pouring fresh concrete over the bloody stage, the FBI's Elite Forensic Team is stuck on a tarmac.
Microphone is what was shattered.
The whistleblower claimed the delay was caused by a shortage of available agency planes and pilots, specifically because FBI Director Kash Patel was utilizing the aircraft for personal, non-official use.
I mean, you literally can't write a movie script like that. The director of the FBI is out joyriding in the agency jet while the most important crime scene of the decade is being paved into a parking lot.
The alt-media sources look at that and say, that's not incompetence. That is a deliberate stand-down order disguised as bureaucracy to allow the cleaners time to sanitize the stage.
And Patel's public behavior only exacerbated the
Some people
suspicion.
thought that he had
Hours
grabbed that
after
guy
the
had
shooting,
grabbed
while the
something on the
nation was
table,
in
and I had
total
confirmed
chaos,
to you that he did
Patel
not.
prematurely announced on his social media that the suspect was apprehended.
Do you want to go back to that slide so they can see that?
But within 2 hours, he had to frantically backtrack and admit the person they had in custody was released and wasn't the shooter.
This erratic communication fueled massive speculation that the FBI wasn't conducting a real investigation at all.
The alternative theory suggests
and created the exit wound that we told you was an exit wound immediately when we saw that exit wound. First we had exploding pager.
In order to declare the case solved and shut down any deeper inquiries into the explosive mic theory.
And it brings us full circle right back to those TMZ documents.
The defense for Tyler Robinson is staring down the barrel of the death penalty case. They know the ATF said the bullet doesn't match the gun.
They know the shirt puffed out, they know the mic shattered.
But they are buried under 60,000 pages of digital discovery, while the physical reality of the blast zone is literally entombed under concrete.
The distance between the official Wikipedia page and this alternative narrative is like looking at two completely different dimensions. Wikipedia gives you a clean, simple story about a kid on a roof with a rifle.
But the deeper you dig into the source material, the frame-by-frame physics of the explosion, the purge staff, the cauterized wound, the joyriding FBI director, the geopolitical motives, the more the official story looks like a flimsy piece of cardboard propped up in front of a terrifying global conspiracy.
And while we must constantly remind ourselves that we are simply mapping these claims today and not validating them as proven truth, the phenomenal traction of this theory highlights a profound societal anxiety.
In an era where digital information can be endlessly manipulated, where videos are debated from their phone and numbers are implemented, physical evidence remains the only true authority.
When that physical evidence is compromised, when the ATF rightly admits the bank doesn't lie, and the crime scene is literally buried in cement before the sun goes down, when the FBI is on the way, that influence...
Charlie Kirk's right side of his t-shirt. Watch the lavalier lapel mic. Do you see it explode?
Deep dive talking about the
Let's bring it in just a little bit closer. Watch this. Put it in a freeze frame. That is the explosion from Charlie Kirk's lavalier. That was absolutely an exit wound. Yeah, it is. Check the trajectory of the round that was deployed from that lavalier lapel mic. That went directly from Charlie Kirk's lapel. That went directly from underneath Charlie's neck and created the exit wound that we told you was an exit wound immediately when we saw that exit wound. First, we had exploding page analysis from John Bray. That proves that all of the activity came from the mic that Charlie Kirk was wearing. That shadowy looking guy with the sunglasses. Yeah, he pushes the detonator. Clear as day.
The very devices we trust to protect our identities can be secretly, quietly turned